Britain will be one of the great AI superpowers. And AI is the way. It's to secure growth, to raise living standards, put money in people's pockets, create exciting new companies, and transform our public services. And I want people to look back on this generation and be proud of what we started today. AI isn't something sort of the future over the next hill. It's the present. It's already here, in Britain, changing lives.
Military application of AI is extremely controversial. Images of killer robots and the idea of AI run amok are frequent additions to stories in the press about the risks the technology poses. Nevertheless, militaries around the world are already using artificial intelligence.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser focused on competing to win.
So welcome to this latest edition of In Defence. I'm very, very grateful to be joined by Philip Morris, the head of defence at Palantir. He's a massive advocate for AI, particularly. I've been watching you quite a lot on the House of Commons Defence Committee, advocating the potential of AI. So thank you so much for joining us today. I guess getting into this right, please treat me as a bit of an idiot here because, I understand the acronym, but what is artificial intelligence? Is it just a very fast way of processing information, or is it something that's able to think and potentially outwit humans?
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and thank you very much for having me on the show. Really, we should think of AI as a foundational technology. It's not a building block, so to speak. It's not an expansion pack. It's not something that you can just stick on. It will be a revolution, certainly, to military technology, to the scale of the introduction of the horse to the battlefield. You mentioned, is it able to think? Is it kind of along those lines? Really, it means many different things to different people. And throughout our conversation, it's probably worth disaggregating a little bit the parts that AI can mean, certainly in a defense setting. But from the top, really, it is best thought of as a capability that will allow incredibly effective and fast decision making across the entire breadth of data that any military individual, whether they be an operator or a senior leader, could have access to.
I guess one of the reasons I'm picking up on this is that some years ago I was working in Afghanistan, and one of the challenges we faced was trying to find where IEDs were laid, and the human eye found it very difficult to pick them up, whereas actually, if you were able to use technology, it was able to do this much better. But of course, we've all seen the Terminator films, Cyberdyne technologies, and the like. And of course, therefore, there's this sort of slight paranoia that we're giving a machine the ability to think, to be, I think, self-aware is one of the terms that's used. But we do seem a long way away from that. Some of those sorts of areas of AI just don't seem to be in reach at the moment. So is it much more focused on just very fast processing power, able to do far quicker than we were able to do? And when do you think we might drift into that more thinking, self-aware phase for AI?
Sure. So on the first bit, speed is certainly an important and interesting element. These models are able to process far greater amounts of data at faster speeds than we might be able to hold on the tip of our tongue. They're also able to look at and essentially dissect data sets in ways that might seem slightly unusual to kind of our human processing. However, I don't think really we're too concerned at the moment about the science fiction. There are plenty of real world problems within bounds that allow these technologies to be safely applied to be getting after. There is certainly a discussion and a debate to have around ensuring the appropriate and effective safety of these models. models, as well as the ethics of their applications to certain settings. But as you say, it would be a little bit like deciding that you don't want to use a computer in the 90s because there's a chance that it could bring down the world electricity grid. That there is possibility, there is minor possibility in these things, but by not taking whole-scale advantage of these technologies, really, as a nation, we would be leaving capability on the table.
That's an interesting segue into the sort of so where do you think the threats and the opportunities are for this technology? I'm thinking, mindful we could end up talking about the whole of the world, but let's try and limit ourselves to defense. But
Sure.
given that I've got a few years under my belt, and this isn't a brand new phrase, so I'm just interested in. There's been a lot of rhetoric about it, but apparently AI is being used in Ukraine. But are there, where do you see the main threats and opportunities in this space?
So I'll start with opportunities, and maybe I can just disaggregate slightly the term of AI. It can get over leveraged. Obviously, it's a very popular term. You'd expect that for something that I've just remarked to be a foundational technology that could revolutionize defense and really the world. I think in terms of specific opportunities for defense, it's worth just kind of pulling some bits apart, because that could be in computer vision models, so technologies that look to understand videos or images and perhaps make detections. It could be looking at a battle space and trying to identify novel or unique weapon systems that might be being deployed by the adversary, or new battlefield tactics or doctrine that are being applied, all of which could come from imagery and videos. Again, to kind of my previous point, we as humans might look at one of those images and go, okay, well, I think there's something there, and then maybe try and look at other images or other video. But being able to take the inference of these models and apply it across thousands and thousands of images and video sets to be able to understand different shadows, different angles, different coloring of images, to be able to make recommendations or suggestions to the humans. Really, the key point is enabling the human to be in or on the loop of these decisions that can be made with these technologies. It's not really appropriate for a model to then go and continue to act beyond, say, making a detection. We would want a human to be able to say, okay, we maybe should take the investigation in this direction, or perhaps we need to go and speak to some colleagues in this area over here. So computer vision is certainly one area. Another area could be thinking about the application of large language models, very popular at the moment, driven by a number of commercial entities and the products that they are putting out onto the market. You could think of large language models in a military context as giving a frontline operator or a platoon commander or even a senior leader of a defense department, giving each one of those people an army of 1,000 interns. And if you or I had 1,000 interns, they'd do lots of busy work for us. They'd be able to rapidly streamline our lives. They'd be able to help us make decisions faster, and critically, based upon all the data that we have access to, rather than maybe just the 2 or 3 reports that we might have just read, or the things that might have just happened in front of us in the battle space. The key kind of point here, however, is that you would never, I would hope you or I would never perhaps send out work done by 1,000 interns without checking it. We might think that it's useful, but we'd want to understand what they'd written before we acted and made decisions upon it.
Yeah, so you mentioned the sort of idea of a loop earlier as well, and I am intrigued by this, because as a military commander, you often talk about the OODA loop. Yes. You're getting inside your enemy's OODA loop, and it feels to me there's a slight contradiction here that, you by speeding up potential decision making, you can get inside the loop, but you can now tackle much larger data sets, and therefore the danger is that it slows you down. And I'm always, one of the quotes I'll probably get it wrong because I'm remembering this on the hoof, but I think it was Einstein who said, not everything of measured is of value, and not everything that is of value can be measured. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder, you're into that sort of hub of AI that we might want it to be able to think, whereas in fact it can measure lots of stuff, but how on earth do we synthesize that into swiftly realizable, actionable intelligence and stop ourselves becoming becalmed because we just can't make decisions quick enough?
This it's a great question, Sean. It comes back to my one of my original points around AI is not just going to be something that we can stick on the top of the way that we have built organizations, government departments, society. For it to be most effectively leveraged, we would have to embrace this as a foundational technology that is deeply embedded in every aspect of the running of said kind of organization or society. And really, in doing so, it means that these models or these capabilities have deep understanding of the things that you or I or decision makers in those capacities are trying to do. If we would look to just try and stick a computer vision model, a large language model, even a physics-based model around kind of optimization or kind of scheduling, something around supply chains, looking at ensuring that the right munitions are in the right place at the right time, and that's optimized on a global scale, is that if those models don't have the context of, say, military doctrine or the current global events or the priorities of the government at the time, or even of perhaps of the doctrine and all the kind of equivalent pieces there of the adversary, it's likely that the model will actually just add noise. It could come up with some useful inferences, but the test and the challenge is ensuring that these capabilities are deeply embedded into the way in which we want to run and want to deliver capability and effect, to ensure that the models have the best understanding of, I don't know, UK military doctrine or the kind of the way that a certain organization wants to operate or the types of goals that it is looking to try and achieve. So it is quite difficult, and certainly the last couple of years have shown the West that it is tricky just to take these capabilities and stick them on top. Or it is tricky to get value from that approach. It might seem as though AI is being done. The harder, more kind of useful or impactful task and approach is to embed these technologies in a way that they understand the business logic of these organizations, so that then when they're making a suggestion, it's relevant to the decisions that we're all trying to make.
I'm very mindful, though, that as you're speaking, I'm thinking, I just wonder how many people in the defense space who are empowered to look into the future, to secure capabilities, genuinely understand what this capability is all about. I know when I was in the MOD, you've got a lot of sharp-suited salesmen who are lining up to knock on your door, selling you the best thing since sliced bread. And therefore, and I do wonder if people don't genuinely understand the potential of this new capability, they aren't advocates for it, how on earth do they chart a course for adopting it? So mindful of that. In strategic terms, how would you crack that nut? Where do you think the priority should be for UK defence for adopting AI?
I think the AI Opportunities Action Plan that the government published yesterday is a very good start. I have spent a lot of time in opportunities like this over the last couple of years talking about the interlocking set of obstacles that exist between the potential panacea of AI and actually getting there to be able to kind of deliver effect. And a number of those, as you would expect, perhaps my position to be being a technologist, are based upon the fundamental or foundational technological pieces. So the report the government published yesterday begins with the foundations and the energy requirements that these data centers are going to require, and where these data centers could be placed. If we get a little bit more specific, at least to a military context, that means, to your question, enabling the best of breed of these capabilities to be rapidly competed, to ensure that the best capability is chosen and applied, enabling the underlying kind of fundamental bits of technology that are required to deploy these models. So appropriate computer networks at varying degrees of classification, and for those networks to be resilient and powerful enough to be able to run these models. as well as then available or access to data. Without data, the models have nothing to run on. They have nothing to crunch through. And getting those data into a state in which these models can be most effective to enable that faster, more effective decision making is the types of meaty actions and approaches that people can take in order to be able to realize the benefits of these technologies.
But you mentioned the Prime Minister's statement. Looking at this, I think there have been 5 different UK Prime Ministers who've all said that AI is really important. It's the centre and championed it. And there seems to be a massive gap between the rhetoric and actually the action. And again, you used the example there of, right, let's make sure we've got the electricity supplies to do the cooling. That's an enabler. It's not embedding. It's not creating the sort of foundations of where AI sits within defense, because intuitively it feels like it should be almost a foundation of defense rather than a plug-on additive. Let's pay a few quid and just see what it does. And that, looking back for the last few years, that seems to be what we're doing. Have we got an AI advocate? Have we got a head of AI? Have we got somebody who's empowered, emboldened with access to genuinely see how we pioneer this space? Maybe I'm just being a bit of a cynic around the political space, but reading between the lines, it felt still like a bit of, I think I ought to be at the head of AI, so I'll say a few words. But I didn't really read anything that felt to me changing the game.
The action plan itself, certainly spearheaded by Matt Clifford, speaks to a number of specific actions that could be taken. I agree that these are of a very large scale and will take time to come to fruition. However, that shouldn't come at the expense or detriment of making the incremental improvements on a day-to-day basis. And perhaps a specific example there is that you are right, is that it must be a revolution to the foundation of how the British military is structured if it is to take best advantage of AI. However, an approach that could be taken there is that if we look kind of post World War II, post Cold War, some of the kind of the deepest relationships that the MOD forms are with prime contractors, with outfits that make hardware to enable military effect. Those are clearly very important and continue to be important in the age of AI. However, an approach that I think could be taken that would allow substantive, even if incremental, movement towards the foundational embedding of AI into the military ecosystem is for new relationships to be formed with organizations that previously wouldn't have dreamed of having business or interaction with defense departments. There is significant investment being made into Western AI companies, and it is those companies that will enable the West to counter the threats that come from our adversaries and their own investments. However, those companies are over kind of the course of, let's say, decades, are still rather unusual or slightly obscure for the MOD to be doing business with. Great progress has been made in that area with a couple of departments, Commercial X and the DAKE, over the last few years in ensuring access to those capabilities. But anything that could be done by the Ministry of Defence to ensure a faster, more rapid OODA loop or cycle with respect to the enablement of those technologies from those companies in the way that they have built a strength of relationship with the primes in the past would allow for substantive progress towards the potential that AI holds.
But one of the things, Philip, that you're highlighting here is that the dichotomy, I think, facing UK defence today, it's one of the reasons we're running this series of podcasts, is that in the last 35 years, the big primes, it's creates jobs, it's prosperity. Because we're in wars of choice, not wars of national survival, there's been this sense that the big primes can actually, therefore, deliver on a number of different agendas. And the problem when I've been in MOD myself is that some of the smaller companies, particularly around technology, often are here today, gone tomorrow. I mean, I was looking at some of the companies around the AI space. Palantir is an established company, but I think it's only 1 in 5 of the companies endures for more than a year or two. And of course, that creates a really worrying landscape. The MOD needs to be embracing technology. It needs to be innovative. It needs to be at the forefront of this. But of course, there are huge risks involved in doing that, because the companies, some of them, in fact, potentially the majority of them, will fail along the way. And that is very difficult for public money. How, therefore, do we create that different conversation where you have, you know, a partnership approach rather than a customer supplier approach around something like this, where I suggest the MOD probably isn't a very smart customer at the moment?
I think it comes back to the point I made around those interlocking set of obstacles. The first of which is the technical foundations, getting the kind of that first layer on which models can be applied, whether those be computer networks, so on and so forth. Once companies, of which there are many in the UK, those that could have technologies that could be of use to the MOD, once those companies can see and realize and understand that those foundational kind of building blocks exist, they are going to be somewhat greater incentivized to want to develop technologies that could be of use. The next set, however, of those interlocking obstacles is commercial. So the speed at which those companies can be interacted with, competed, even if they lose the competition, but to be a part of it, to understand the data sets, to understand the challenges. And the imperative part there is ensuring both access to data and access to the operator. I use that as shorthand really to mean just access to the problems. So these small innovative companies of maybe they're 3 people, 5 people, 50 people have the skills and the potential technological advancements in their locker to be able to bring great effect. But if they don't have the technological pieces upon which they could deploy those models, or they don't have the potential access, should they win a competition, to the data or to the problem sets or to the kind of the military user, it's unlikely that they're going to be incentivized. But let's say then both of those things did exist. In doing so, we would be replicating an environment that has begun to exist in the United States over the last 5 years or so, which is that the foundations are there. There is clear route to how a company could bring its technology, apply it in a military sense, be on contract, have data and access to the users within months, which then very rapidly will attract large amounts of private capital to these problem sets, which is the kind of, whether it be the rocket booster or the crutch to any of these companies that would allow them to further develop and hopefully cross what you've described, which would be known as the valley of death. So taking it from an idea and allowing that company or that product could exist and pervade for many years to come.
So mindful that this is a sort of forefront of a new age of technology potentially, I'm minded that you mentioned America. America, China, there are some pretty big players in this space. Is it possible, for the UK to compete in that space? Should we just throw our towel in and jump in bed with the Americans here? Or are there key capabilities, innovations, capabilities in the UK that give us hope that it's worth investing in this country? And what would that look like? How would we, because we clearly can't compete on the sort of the money and the influx of investment that the American model can have. But so what does it look like for the UK? Why is it worth investing in this new capability?
There is absolutely a part for the UK to play on the global stage. And I'm not just saying that as you and I are UK citizens. It comes from the fact that we have the skills and the talent to be able to play a part. I'm choosing my words there carefully in terms of playing a part. It's not as though necessarily competing, but the UK is world leading in a number of areas that make up, as I said, the kind of the aggregated terms of AI. And there are absolutely areas in which developments and advancements and investments in the UK could be utilized across the West and recognized as world leading. For instance, some of the capabilities in signal processing that exists in the UK, certainly of which you can chart back through the decades all the way through to kind of post-World War II actions, as well as then the strength of STEM subjects in UK universities, means that there is very much a part to play here. I think one of the interesting questions is that if you look at that talent and those skills and potential advancements, a lot of that direction of travel in the UK is towards the services sector, whether that be consulting or banking or the like. And the question really is that if the UK wants to take advantage of the ability to play on that global stage, is how we will be able to encourage that talent to move towards sectors such as defence that would enable the kind of the prizes that are on offer there.
Yeah, so it's how do we stop that brain drain as well? Because I've spoken to a few colleagues in this space, and of course, with the American money and everything flowing around this, first of all, how do you stop it just disappearing offshore? And secondly, the point you made is I remember talking to software engineers. We talked about NEC, networks-enabled capability, for many years. And when I talked to some of the experts in commercial world, they said, if we want to try and do business with the MOD, we have to knock on the door, somebody slides a slider across, what do you want? It's just difficult. Whereas if we sit at home, gamers and companies just knock on the door, offer us loads of cash and take us out the door. How on earth does the MOD ever compete with those sorts of demands? And it seems to be a perfect storm at the moment, that there are very few of my colleagues, maybe I just should get out more, but that few of my colleagues in the MOD really understand what this capability is about. And therefore, how does Palantir, how do the big companies both attract and retain some of the brightest minds in order to create the very foundations of this country that you've just described?
It's access to problems, Sean. The people and the skills and the talent that I describe that exists in great degree in the UK really want to be solving problems, and I don't doubt that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of individuals, even more, around the UK that have probably never thought about working for defence, or if they have thought that it's closed off or that there's no way in, as you say, the kind of slide and hear the answer type thing. Is that if there is I know there are ways in which these problems can be shared. It's that middle layer of the obstacles that I kind of bucketed into commercial, but finding the actions that can be taken that allow someone that perhaps has great talent in building ML models, or in manipulating data sets, or software engineering, that perhaps has never previously thought about working in or for or around the Ministry of Defence, but realizing that their work, their effort, their actions could make a tangible difference to the UK's position on a global scale, even to the defence of the homeland and the kind of the protection and the safety of themselves, their friends and their family in the UK. It's taking those problems, and I'm not suggesting that they then go and get published in the newspaper, but allowing a route of access that would enable individuals and companies, whether they be 3-person spin-outs or 50,000 person megacorps, to be able to say, okay, there's an interesting problem. They've given us some data to go try. They've given us 2 weeks to try and go and solve a thing. That is very much an enticing opportunity for the generation that exists, that wants to be using this technology, that wants to be doing something that matters with their life. And it is a very tangible action that broadly the UK, whether we then further specify as the government or even further into the Ministry of Defence, could take in enabling the application of the skills that exist in the UK, as well as then enabling the kind of the prize of a position on the global stage of AI.
So, Philip, mindful of the time, I've just got 2 more questions for you, really. Really more short fire, short sharp, really. You're involved in the defence, head of defence for Palantir. In a nutshell, what's the most exciting potential opportunity you see for AI in the defence space that you've bumped into? What that really gets you out of bed? Where do you think the most exciting potential there is?
You want me to say, Sean, they're kind of on the battlefield and with the maps and across full motion video?
Not
And
flying jets. That's what I don't want to hear you talking about, flying jets. That's
honestly, I would say, I mean, there's a number of areas. There is so much to do. I would say that I am fascinated by the potential in the logistics and supply chain space. That is a deeply complex, incredibly data-rich environment upon which the optimization of that with technologies that are well-tuned and trained to specifically understand and enable the kind of the types of outcomes that are required in, say, last mile resupply. There is lots and lots that can be done there, particularly in a resource and equipment constrained environment that the MOD finds itself in at the moment. There is also immense tribal knowledge that exists across the Ministry of Defence, as in any large department. Defence departments are particularly hamstrung by government classification schemes, and therefore information existing at different levels and different people knowing different things. That leads to significant siloing and therefore a lack of the kind of overall exploitation of the knowledge that that a defense department may have. And so that army of 1,000 interns being given to every decision maker, regardless of the significance of the decisions being made, but also ensuring that those army of 1,000 interns have an expert understanding of the entire business logic of the MOD, whether that be understanding the entirety of the UK military doctrine as published through JSPs, or whether that be the understanding of every single piece of equipment on all of the shelves of all of the QMs around the country. It's those slightly dull, menial, boring work tasks that if enabled by AI technologies, allows the operators, the platoon commanders, the senior leaders, that kind of spectrum of decisions being made there, to go focus their efforts and energies on higher order decisions or kind of asks or tasks that need to be done. So both the logistics supply chain, but also that army of 1,000 interns understanding the entirety of the business logic of the MOD it has huge opportunity for the UK.
Yeah, it does make me chuckle, actually, because they always talk about for every pound we spend in procurement, we spend £7 through life, and it's on that logistics support. So it may not be that sexy. It's where the money and it's where the capability lies. So you're absolutely right. Final question then really for you, given that we, in my research for this has been rumbling on for some years. You've been trying to help the government. We talked about 5 different prime ministers. If you were king for the day, what's the one thing you would try and do to unlock this process so that the UK defence can genuinely exploit the potential of AI?
I would look to remove that slat in the door. I would look to open arms and state that I would want to hear from all and any company that or outfit or organization or university, it doesn't need to just be commercial, that believes that they want to be involved in applying the revolutionary technology of our era to problem sets as significant as those faced by the UK and the Ministry of Defence. And I think in doing so, we could catalyse the interests of a generation. I think we could make significant strides against the challenges faced, not just by the MOD, but by the UK as a whole. And I think it would foster a new age of partnership across industry, moving beyond just a small selection of companies that make hardware. They will continue to be involved, but embellishing those with a whole range of people and skills and companies and organizations that previously may not have even imagined ever working with or around the defense sector. And I think in doing so, we would rapidly make progress towards the types of challenges that AI is so neatly aligned to solve.
Philip Morris, thank you so much for your time. Head of Defence at Palantir. I could have talked for hours with you on this. There's so many aspects to it, but genuinely, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Sean.